All right. I think we'll get started. As more people pop in, they'll just pop in, right? So welcome everyone. This is a wonderful guest speaker we have here, Matthew Freedman, or is it Matt? I don't know what you prefer. Either
Go
or.
with Matt. It's slightly shorter.
All right, Matt it is. Um, if you guys have any questions, we have a Q&A set up for you to put your questions in there, and then we'll get them whenever we get to them. So, I'll leave it with that. You can introduce yourself if you'd like, and we'll get right started. So, woo.
Okay. Hey, everyone. So, yes, I'm Matt Freedman, professional designer, design director, creative director, all that stuff. Been in the industry for about 20 years now. I've kind of lost track at a certain number of years. You're just like, okay, whatever. It's been a while. Started off in the same place a lot of you guys are in right now, and that is being a game design student. So I went from there over to now being a director working for some large companies, which has been great. So want to help give you guys some information about what it takes to build your design career and succeed in design. But I want to start off getting a couple of questions from you guys, because the one thing you're going to take away from this talk: what does design do? Your job, no matter what kind of designer you are, that is, pardon my amazing handwriting. Design solves customer problems. This is your job as a designer. All you do all day, every day, you're solving customer problems. So this is the thing. A lot of people think being design is about making cool shit, or being super creative or clever. It is, as long as you're doing this. A lot of the stuff from a really well-respected design company like your Nintendos or your Apples or your Ikeas, this is what they do. They just focus on this stuff. Doesn't matter how cool you think it is, how good you think it is, you always are doing this. In that spirit, I'm going to ask you guys, because you guys are my customer, what's the biggest concern you guys have? Burning questions. What do you guys need to know? And I'm going to see about what I can do to solve customer problems. Also, how spicy are we allowed to get with language with this group?
I mean, we're all mostly adults, right? So, a little bit of swearing isn't necessarily out of the question, right?
Then shit's going to get real. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. So let me know. What are the biggest concerns you guys have? What do you want to know? Where do you need to go? I want to give you guys a little bit of my professional background to hopefully maybe help structure this. In the 20 years, I worked at Electronic Arts on the FIFA franchise, Rockstar on Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Max Payne 3. I've helped to start a bunch of indie companies. I've done VR. I've done mobile. I've done serious games. I've actually run a school myself. I've done a bunch of teaching. Designed a bunch of non-game stuff. I had some fun making commercial products. I made a fireplace DVD that was a lot of fun. I still get fan mail about it. It's great.
I mean, I'll start off with maybe one of my questions here. You talked about how you started out at a game design school, and you've run. You said that you've kind of done some school stuff yourself as well. How do you kind of translate those experiences between classroom learning of this is how you make a game design document, let's say, right? How do you kind of translate that into AAA or indie workplaces?
That's a good question. So, let me think here. We're gonna start off with some cognitive science, because that's my favorite fucking topic on the planet. So, what it is, Employers are hiring you to solve their problem, and they want to know that you're capable of solving their problem. That is what a certification from a school is supposed to indicate. This person is ready to solve employer problems. Employer problems are ultimately these problems, customer problems. If you got an employer that doesn't have some damn customers, you do not have an employer. That's not a company. That's someone's hobby at that point. So any employee you work for is going to have customer problems. What they want to know is that you're capable of solving the problems of their customers. So this is where we're getting into this. So where is it? Your ability to solve a problem will depend on your understanding of that problem and you pursuing it as an objective. So one of those things is that a lot of people think that we solve problems through a rational model of like, I will solve, it's a linear sequence of events with, I've got to get from, let me think, I'm at point A, trying to get to point B, and there's like obstacles in front of me. I'm trying to get to those obstacles. They're very bad with obstacles. So oftentimes people see it as being like I see it as being like a linear kind of sequence of problems that are solved. I go forwards, then I turn, then I go here, then I'm going to turn again. Sorry. Then go forwards, turn again, forwards, turn. That's how it looks, but actually, how your brain solves problems, it kind of does that. Let me erase this very poorly. I appreciate everyone's patience with my terrible whiteboard skills. This is not what I studied. Is actually what happens is how you solve problems most effectively is you have an understanding of your objective, what you're trying to do. You will then subconsciously solve for the obstacles that are in front of you, but you need to understand where you're going and the tools you have to get past these obstacles. So, example, to give everyone, if I'm going somewhere, I don't think left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. I think, oh, I got to get to the store. I will put on my shoes because that's a tool I use. I will go through the door. I will walk down the street. I will go to the store. I will open up the door. So this is the thing. So the reason why I mention this is that as an employer, I want to know that you've internalized the ability to solve a problem for an external customer that is my customer. And within that, you internalizing that, you will also naturally know how to develop gameplay along that direction. So this is actually what I'll do in a lot of my design projects right now, is that we talk about our customer experience. Well, what do you want the customer to feel? Do we want this to be exciting, tense? Do we want it to be strategic? Do we want it to be action-packed, mysterious? And then once we understand where we're going, we start to figure out the design that supports that objective. But that's a far easier way of solving for a problem than for us trying to individually plan out all of our features and assume that those features will move us to our destination. So I'm saying is that as an employer, if I'm looking at a student portfolio, I have been an employer. I have looked at student portfolios. What I look at is who is your customer. That's one of the biggest things I need to look at is who is your customer. Was your customer other students? Was it your teacher? Did you actually commercially release this? Because that's what I know is that have you been able to, how close is the customer you've solved for to my customer? I'm much more interested in that than in the specific technical skills you have, because every company is a different workflow. Every company is a different tech stack. And those workflows and tech stacks are constantly changing. So that's something I'm going to have to teach you anyways. Like at the start, it's going to be like, hey, these are our design documentation standards. Here's our tech standards. Here's our, rendering pipeline. Here's the interface that we're using, all that kind of stuff. And like, it's the damnedest thing in the industry. Everyone swears they follow a standard and everyone's standard's different. It's like, it's never time to talk to a company. Like, okay, so like, talk about your implementation of Unreal Engine. They're like, oh, we just use everything standard. I go in there and I'm like, well, I don't know if standard and custom mean the same thing around here, but this is all stuff I've never seen before. you know. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly check in the chat. What do we have here? Is this the Q&A area? Yes, I'd say chat. Is chat the Q&A area? Or is there a better
I mean,
place?
honestly, either or works. If students end up putting them in the messages here, it works. We have a couple
Okay.
questions that are in the Q&A, so I'll get to those after this question, probably.
Okay, cool. All right. So does that answer the question you had there for us, Lucas?
Yeah, I think it. You went into a lot of stuff of like, it's not necessarily about the actual, end product necessarily, but it's like how close you got to getting towards your like, target audience, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that like what I want to know when I'm in an interview, do you have experience solving my customer problems?
Yeah.
That's the most that's the most critical thing I could be looking at. And that's, if you're in an interview, that's what you want to communicate, is be like, hey, I know that this is like the company, this is your market, this is what they like, this is what they don't like, these is where you've had problems, this is how I'd help address this, all that kind of stuff.
Quickly, before we move on to another one, because it just kind of popped up to me, do you feel like, it's important for students to work on projects that maybe align with their sort of goals as like a developer themselves, like their career goals? Let's say you want to be a VR developer. Do you feel like it's important to have experience, like a variety of experience on VR projects? Or do you think maybe like a couple hobbyist projects and then other pieces that show that you've worked on design problems, you've worked towards trying to make sure that you're solving these customer problems, but you also have like a little bit of experience in virtual reality, for example, right?
For that, I'd want someone who's really internalized design thinking. This is the thing. So when I started off I was a director on a VR project before I'd ever had any experience with VR development. But a lot of that was like when we're designing a game, pardon. I'm designing for this, and it's displayed on one of these. VR, this is now spatial and has a gyroscope and different inputs. And this, the display, now has motion control, and it's two monitors that are a specific distance in front of the eye. I understand how the human eye works and how it reacts to a display. So I know how to structure a gameplay for that. So for example, your eye has there's multiple different visual systems in your eye, but there is an inner and outer fovea for your eye. Your inner fovea looks at detail. Your outer fovea looks at motion. The outer fovea also cues your what would it be? Your auto nervous system for movement. So it's an interesting thing, and that is with VR, because you have a limited field of view, the outer fovea does not get the input it needs to cue your auto nervous system for movement to have people look around. So that is why in VR, it's really frustrating if you get attacked from behind, even if there's cues, because then I'm like, much of your processing is subconscious. In the real world, I will see something threatening out of the corner of my eye before I know what I'm looking at. Then I have that reaction before I've even thought about it. But because in VR, it's not, I don't notice it here. I notice it here because of the limited FOV. That's now going into the domain of my inner fovea, which then says, oh, by the way, you're supposed to move because you noticed that. My nervous system's going, shit, I was supposed to happen way back there. And it just gets frustrating. Sorry, going a little bit of a tangent there. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, it is better to have the exact experience that an employer is looking for, but also if you can understand those fundamentals, a lot of that knowledge will transfer across domains. One of my props here is okay, does anyone here know who Dieter Rams is? Dieter Rams. Let me know in the chat if you know who Dieter Rams is. Oh, okay. Well, that's an indictment of the education system. Dieter Rams, I got his book right here, is probably the best designer in history, just about. He was the lead designer for Braun, much of what you interact with from a day-to-day basis is based on Dieter Rams' designs. Apple takes a lot of inspiration from him. Nintendo takes a lot of inspiration from him. Shigeru Miyamoto studied Dieter Rams. Dieter Rams designed mixers and stereos and chairs and all sorts of stuff, and it's all the standard now that everyone's copying for a lot of the stuff he designed because he understood those fundamentals so much. If you get a chance, research Dieter Rams and his design fundamentals. That is stuff that carries not just within the world of physical goods, but also within the digital world, within video games. Good game design is ultimately just good design. So say the more you understand design fundamentals, the easier it is for you to move across different platforms and different genres. But as an employer, I'm generally looking for someone with the specific skills that have the ability to solve my customer problems. So if you are approaching it from an angle of design fundamentals, you need to be able to illustrate that within the kind of projects that you've worked on, and also in the interview about, hey, within this problem of, like I said, like we get the problem of VR, I'm like, look, I haven't done any VR before, but let me tell you what's actually happening with VR. Did you know about this entire thing with the inner-outer phobia? How that works with the auto nervous system, how we're breaking this down with controllers, how do you mentally map onto the tools you have and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, and like, look at VR, a lot of VR games think that they're, you know, a magical portal into another dimension. It's not. It's still a game controller. It's still a display. It's just got some different rules to it. All right. Anything else?
That covers it for me. We've got a couple questions here. We've one about like how do you start your design process? You know, you talked about that, like A to B. You said kind of tooling is your first part. Is there any other like maybe tips you have of like how do you end up like starting, you know, maybe you have a problem, but how do you identify it?
Yeah, let me think about that. I'm either identifying a problem or a place I want to get the customer emotionally. So if I'm working on designing a specific technical element, like an inventory system, or a aiming reticle or a weapon, I'm like, okay, what's the problem we need to solve here? So like I'm going into like my inventory system, I'm like, okay, players need to be able to very quickly understand what's the damage threshold across all the things I have in my inventory. I got a whole bunch of weapons, and I can't be like, it's gonna be frustrating if I pick at each every single one and look at their stats individually. I need a way of very quickly understanding, okay, this rocket launcher has this kind of damage output. The sniper rifle has this kind of damage output. Because like what I want for the player is they go into an environment like, oh shit, I need to get my best sniper rifle for this specific type of monster. Go into the inventory, they see it right away, they grab it, they're back in the gameplay. Good design should always be invisible. They shouldn't even understand that they've interacted with amazing design. It's just, they're just grabbing that weapon, fighting, getting into the fight, feeling victory, you know, all that kind of stuff. So if the technical problem, I'm starting with what's the problem the player is trying to solve. If I'm going for more of an experience, then I'm looking at, okay, what is the emotion I want the player to be feeling with this? And that's like, okay, I want this I want this sniper rifle to feel mysterious, but also very powerful. I want this almost have this feeling of like I'm wielding a weapon I shouldn't have. I'm digging into dark forces here. I'm probably using something I shouldn't, you know. And from that, we're like, okay, then there's specific VFX we're looking at. There's specific sound effects. There's perhaps a type of mechanic that's going to reinforce that. Like maybe there's, you know, I have to keep on feeding the sniper rifle some kind of resource for some strange reason, and when that happens, it starts to change its properties, or I don't know, something that feels vaguely sinister. Let me think. Yeah, because like an important thing to understand is most people engage with products emotionally. We then back up our emotions with rational thought. So it's really important to understand what is the emotion behind the overall design. But that doesn't mean every single design has emotion. Some designs are naturally emotionally inert. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna, as you guys don't know, I have latent psychic abilities. And even though your cameras are off, I'm getting a feeling. Wait. Okay, I can see the rooms you're in, all of them. You're all mostly surrounded by modern Scandinavian design. It's all minimal and clean, and you probably bought it at IKEA. It's all this stuff. It's all very simple, you know. It's these kinds of lines, and you know, this kind of stuff. There's some other modern Scandinavian. There we go. There's another modern Scandinavian design I've got with my mouse. What I'm going at is that all this stuff is while emotion's important, you also have several things in your day-to-day life you don't want to have be emotionally engaging. I don't want to have the most exciting fucking whiteboard on the planet. I just need a useful goddamn whiteboard, you know? So that's the thing, is understand that level of emotional engagement. Really interesting example of this is if you look at Italian design, and in my humble opinion, Italians are some of the best designers on the planet. Like the number of countries that are not Italian that will identify Italian design with prestige and quality, it's quite staggering. But one of the things with Italian design is they're all in on emotion. An Italian sports car, it is very sensual and exotic and intense. And that's why like it costs, you know, $150,000. And same thing for Italian suits and clothing and artwork and media. At the same time, if everything in the environment is Italian design, that is a wildly overwhelming environment. You want a couple very choice Italian pieces. All right. Just a heads up, I've got a hard stop at half hour past the hour.
Yep, no worries. We'll try and get through as much as we can, but you know, we might miss a couple. So I'll pick and choose here. What are some tips you might have for making yourself and your products, you know, like stand out during our time here at the university? We're here for 4 years. We're ranking at least 4 games, right? How do you kind of make yourself stand out amongst, you know, the other 99 students that are with you in your year?
Release stuff publicly, get customers, and listen to those customers. Like that's what I want to see. Is like you gotta like I need to see if experience with customer problems. Be like, hey, like even if it's a bad game, that's fine. Just be like, you release it, people try it, you iterate on it, you play test. Like this is within my like design process. We do weekly play tests. Just you know, no matter what, we're always doing that play test. That play test is the sacred time, and we always get some new rando to play it, and we just watch them play, and then we take the feedback from that. We aren't allowed to interrupt them. We aren't allowed to correct them. Not to tell them they're doing it wrong. The thing as well with your designs, really, there's no wrong way for the customer to play your game. It's like even if they're being intentionally destructive, like you gotta ask yourself, okay, why do we have customers that are intentionally destructive? Because most customers aren't. So that's a rare thing. Oftentimes, when they're being intentionally destructive, they're telling you what they want to do. You're just not letting them do it. You know, and that's an important thing with a playtest. You're like, oh, okay, players are much more interested in like opening treasure chests than fighting monsters. Okay, what do we do with that? You know, telling them not to open treasure chests isn't the solution. We got to figure out a way to pivot with that. So by the time you just shrug, you're like, okay, where's the really cool treasure hunting game now? We're just going to lean into that, and we just have our monsters are in the background. I thought this was going to be about fighting monsters. It's actually about finding treasure now. And you'll be amazed at just like how much players will just love that. So I think within your projects, what I want to see as an employer is I want to see you releasing stuff publicly, getting feedback, iterating on it, being sensitive to customer needs, being able to work within constraints, being able to take feedback. Because remember, as soon as you're like taking a paycheck, it's no longer your game. It's like it's the company's game. Like that's what makes you a professional, is that you're making a product for someone else. If you're making it for yourself, it's now just kind of a big hobby. Even with like, you know, artists that are lauded as being auteurs and that kind of stuff. If you actually look at them in interviews, they are very focused on what the customer does. Like one of my favorite examples is like Alan Moore will talk a lot about the customer, about the reader's experience going through his various works and graphic novels. He's like, look, if I do this, it gets the customer there. They're going to subvert that with this, and that'll be really exciting. Then we go over here, and it's all dark and scary and sinister. And then we put them over here, and then this will happen. So that's the thing I'd want to see as an employer, is that you're releasing stuff. You're not being precious about it. You're customer oriented. You're iterating quickly. Also, another big thing is try to tap down your ego as much as possible. Nothing is more expensive on a game dev project than someone with a runaway ego. That will sink your fucking game so quickly, because they just will not take feedback, and they will not realize when they've made a mistake. And mistakes are fine. We all make them. I make 50 mistakes a day. I'm just like, oh, well, that's another list on the Matt fuck up. I shouldn't have done that. Let me go and fix that. It's fine to make mistakes. You just have to own them. All right.
So you spoke about your experience as an employer looking at portfolios and such. You talked about making sure that people are releasing things publicly and taking back feedback. Are there any other items that you feel are important in a designer's portfolio, or even their resume?
Let me think. So portfolios aren't nearly as important as an actual shipped product. And it's one of those things, man, it's so easy to get stuff on Steam right now. Just put it up on Steam, get customers, get feedback. Let me see that you've actively engaged in that cycle. If you're just showing your game to your friends, then that's not great. I need you showing it to people who are not going to be providing emotional support and encouragement. You need to release it out to an actual audience. Now, regarding resumes, you have to communicate yourself as a clear solution to the employer's problem. So when they're hiring a level designer or a systems designer or a UX designer, that's because they have a specific problem they need you to solve. So you need to be able to say, look, I understand your business, your customer, the kind of design problems that are within this domain, and this is the kind of stuff I have experience solving. Another big problem I see with a lot of students is do not pitch yourself as a generalist. No one hires generalists. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've never, let me try to think. Out of, let's say I've looked at 2,000 job listings, maybe 5 were for generalists. The rest of them, they're looking for a very specific job. Now, if you are a generalist, pick a lane, be like, okay, I really like doing level design, so I'm a level designer. I'm on my resume, it says level designer, but then I'm like, and also on top of level design, I also understand enemy AI, and I understand programming, and I understand animation, which helps me with my overall level design approach. I understand the art pipeline, all that kind of stuff. That's a very compelling pitch, because a hiring manager, when they're looking at a resume, they're trying to think about where to put you within the company. And if your answer is, well, I do just about anything, they'll have no idea where to put you. It's like I always like to think of it like tools in a tool belt. If I have a does everything tool that is not actually useful, I need specifically a hammer, a paintbrush, a screwdriver, a saw. So be very specific about what you're applying for. Also, another thing is have clear, measurable outcomes on your resume. Avoid using soft language like I'm a self-starter, I'm oriented towards quality, et cetera, because those are old lines that anyone can write, and they're almost impossible to measure. So as a hiring manager, I just ignore that stuff. I'm just like, okay, hiring managers spend about 5 seconds on a resume. They just scan through it, and if they see something interesting, then they'll actually look it over. If I'm seeing a lot of stuff, you're like, I'm super passionate about games, and I've always loved them, and I'm really excited about making good customer experiences. I'm like, well, I'm looking for a combat designer, so let me know. Nope, no combat design on this one. Next, combat design, because that's just, that's just how hiring works. I got a stack of these things to get through, so I'm looking for a very specific skill set as I'm scanning these resumes, and that's the thing. Like they get scanned. The employer's eyes go from the look at the top, go down a little bit, look at a summary, quickly read that. If that looks interesting, then they'll quickly look over the rest of the resume. If that is also interesting, then they'll go back and read it in detail.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great.
No worries.
You talked about a little bit of experience in virtual reality, and I assume you're probably maybe a little bit familiar with other modes of augmented reality and such, mixed reality. How do you kind of personally do you feel about the balancing the use of diegetic and like non-diegetic UI in both XR mediums as well as in non-XR mediums? But I think the intention here is that you're looking at that kind of aspect. In virtual reality, is it really, really important that everything is diegetic, or can there be some things that are a little bit less?
Oh, this is interesting question, because actually I've totally been on a big diegetic UI kick in a project I'm working on right now. It's been actually a lot of fun. We're like, look at, we want to like this is the for our design goals, we want to have a clear sense of who this character is and what they do. So all the UI, it's about like looking at this character, how they organize and view the world, and trying to figure out how to make that very clear. So with that, we said we went with a diegetic UI. So it actually is made out of pieces of paper and sticky notes and photographs and that kind of stuff. Well, it's also like the thing is that within we're kind of like the arts and crafts approach, but within that, you still have to be able to quickly find information and understand and have a consistent visual language within this thing that's kind of a cluttered creative space. Now for VR, let me think about that. So diegetic versus non-diegetic UI, it really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. So I worked on a game called Furious Seas, which was a little naval combat VR game. Put it together with a group of like 5 people in like 6 to 8 months, I think was about our timeline. So we had elements of the game that were very diegetic. It's like, as I am piloting the ship I'm on, we have our steering wheel, we have cannons, we had some bells you could use to control speed. All that stuff is diegetic to keep you focused on the physicality of the world, and we wanted the player to constantly be looking around, exploring things visually within VR, because that was what was really neat about VR, was being aware of what was around me. So we're like, look, we don't want to have, we designed it so I'm very rarely going to be attacked from behind, but I'm constantly having to look around for target acquisition. So that made the VR really interesting, because it became, I could be like, just, looking, and just like, it all felt very natural and very interesting. Stand on my tippy toes, try to see over the side of the ship and that kind of stuff. But like when you hit a pause menu, it all went to a non-diegetic UI, because I'm like, yeah, at this point you want to be adjusting your volume. I don't want to have a thing where like I'm turning a crank to like enlarge or shrink down a 3D rendering of a horn. It's like, no, it's a bar with little markers on it, and I hit a plus icon that's very easy to access with the controller. They jump in, they change the volume, they jump out, they're back to playing the game. So it very much depends. If I was doing something that involves a lot of the physical environment, I would be going with a diegetic UI. If I'm going with something more abstract, like if I'm doing Half-Life Alyx, diegetic UI as much as I can. Beat Saber, non-diegetic, more abstract, more interpretive UI. Because like Beat Saber, it's a world of simple lights and colors and very basic shapes.
Yeah, so I guess it's like if you're looking for like maintaining player presence in the world, you want to aim for diegesis, and then if you're a little bit less interested in players being like, oh, like I'm manning the ship and shooting the cannons, right? You can go a little bit more, and especially there where you're talking about like the pause menu. When you're hitting the pause menu, you're already wanting to be like taken out of the world, so to speak, right? So that means you don't need to maintain that diegesis.
That's a big thing as well. Is one important thing with playtests. Oftentimes, players will tell you what they want without directly telling you what they want. Like, It's like, the number of this is a common design problem I see with apps where like they'll gray out buttons and I'll be trying to interact with the grayed out button. I'm like, please just let me change the font on this thing. I'm literally telling you what I want to do, and you're disabled it and you won't tell me why it's disabled. So now I'm just frustrated and pissed off, and now I hate your product.
All right, we have another question here. In terms of students applying for internships specifically, not necessarily like as a junior position, are there things that maybe are not necessarily less important, but like how do you look at an internship application versus like a junior designer? Is there something like, oh, an internship you can have products that suck, and as a junior maybe your products have to not suck, right? Or is it kind of a similar boat?
I generally don't hire interns. I find it's not a great way of finding talent. So let me think about that. Generally, I would say if you're not qualified as a designer, get into a more junior level position. Like look at getting in for QA. A lot of people move from QA into other roles within the company. QA is great. You get exposure to everything within the company. You have to understand, like, because like as you're identifying bugs and talking with teams to let them know that these bugs exist, you also start to understand how they fix these bugs. And within that, you understand the structure of the software, and you get a chance to just talk with a ton of different departments. And if you're a good person to work with, they'll be like, that Bob or that Susan, they're pretty good. I've seen like a lot of people move from QA into very senior roles. I know a lot of people in very like big leadership roles that start off in QA. The guy who's the creative director for Witcher 3, he started off as a QA tester. So internships, I'm always there's another issue with internships, and that is you've now reduced your worth. This is the thing, is that like what someone pays for, a product or a service or an employee is very much reflects on how much they'll be it can reflect on how much they're going to invest in it. And a lot of employers they'll be like, oh, I get interns for free, and they'll just hire on interns, and then they just won't really know what to do with them. But like if that person's actually burning through my bottom line, I'm going to be like, oh my God, that person has to get to work. Give them something to do, because I got to be getting value out of this. So I don't know. I just know too many students that float from internship to internship. I think it's much better like just get a job at the company, work in the cafeteria if you have to. Like that's actually another mistake I see a lot of students do, is that they'll be like, oh, I'm going to be an animator and I'll only be an animator, and they'll be sitting around for 3 years waiting for that animation job. It's like, dude, if you just started off at the bottom and worked your way up, that happens all the time. People start in the mailroom and they work their way up to the C-suite. And companies like that as well, because you understand the entire company then. You've been at the very bottom. You've cleaned the toilets. You've emptied the trash cans. You worked your way up to like, fetching people lunch, and then you started, helping with solving basic problems. And you just work your way up. And by the time you get to leadership, like, oh, you understand how the entire company works, how its systems work, what the inefficiencies are, all that kind of stuff. It's great. So yeah, this is the thing. Like, honestly, for myself, when I work at a company, I still clean toilets. I just think it's an important mindset to have, is be like, I'm here to help this company as much as possible, and if those toilets are dirty, fuck it, I got 5 minutes, I'll clean them.
All right, clean toilets. That's
yeah.
That's how you make it. All right.
That's how you start.
Yeah. It looks like that's all of our questions here. So if there's no others from anybody here that maybe just joined recently, or that's maybe they've been sitting on it, they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask this. Feel free to ask it. That's what they're here for. Oh yeah, you just walked in. Yeah. So make sure that you go clean toilets. That's how you'll start in games.
Humble yourself. That's the real message. Humble yourself and be oriented towards solving problems, even if they're not the exact problem you want to solve. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Is like, Companies hire people who solve problems. That has to be inherent to every fiber of your being, and then you're someone that companies are going to want to have. You know, this is like, let's see, we have a new thing in chat. What should I be doing now in school if I'm looking to be a game designer? Make games. Like, I know this sounds kind of silly, but like, I am far more interested in what you've actually made than in what your GPAs are. Because I don't know how you were graded. I don't know what your teacher was like. There's so many things that go into marking. What I want to see is that you made a game and, you know, you made a game, released it publicly, got the customer feedback, integrated it. You can talk about, like, I love it in an interview if you can tell me all the stupid shit you did. That's great, because we've all been there. You'd be like, oh man, I stored all my variables as strings. That was a bad idea. So many late nights solving that, because I'm like, because honestly, everyone in interviews can be like, yeah, I've done that too. That was really dumb. I've worked on some very large games with shockingly poorly done systems that are still out there and being very successful. It's really just get it done. Get it done. If it works, it works. At a certain point, you can just tape over everything and kind of kick it out the door and be like, well, if no one knows how badly it was done, we'll just walk away. And, you know, it's kind of like if anyone's ever seen The Simpsons, that gag where they take a shortcut, come out of the shortcut all beaten and bruised, and they're like, and we will never speak of the shortcut again. Yeah, so just, I want to see that you've made stuff and you've released it. You know, and like, you got a lot of students around you, use your students as play testers.
Yeah. There's a question about your experience as a game designer on Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5. Are there any, you know, maybe stories from that time that are fun, or just?
Let me think. Yeah. Let me think. Red Dead Redemption 2. That was an interesting one. I worked there as a game designer, and I was in charge of the ambient cutscene system. So, like, for those of you who played Red Dead Redemption 2, you walk into an encampment, and like, you've got the different gang members there. You've got Dutch and Bill, and they'll be in the middle of a conversation, and like, you'll walk up to them and they'll be talking about the current mission you're on, and they'll walk up to you and talk with you, and then, like, you know, Bill will throw a knife over to Dutch, and Dutch catches it and puts it into a wall and points and yells at you or something like that. And that was the system I was in charge of. The challenge, I was told, is they wanted to they wanted to stop halting players for cutscenes. That was their customer problem. Is they kept stopping gameplay to tell story, and like, okay, we need to keep the players in gameplay. So how can we have story happening around them? So I was in charge of designing and implementing that system. And a lot of what that came down to, and it was a solution I was really pleased with, was a lot of it was just figuring out our technical workflow. It was like, ultimately, we're like, look at these are not a series of special bespoke sequences. These are all a sequence of environmentally paired animation and dialogue systems that go through specific characters, and they have specific tags that let us know when they're run. And there's sub tags within those that let us know what's to happen. So, like, when that knife gets tossed from Bill to Dutch, that's an animation tag. When he catches it, that's an animation tag. When he plants it in the wall, that's an animation tag. We're like, all right, now that we know that we actually aren't doing all this fancy stuff, we're actually just doing a couple of very simple things. Let's make tools that just do that. And it was a very technical design problem, but it was great. Like, I think if I remember correctly, originally these sequences took 2 weeks each to get in game, and we were able to get our process down, so it took about 45 minutes, provided we had all the animation and audio data. But we just made it a formula. It was almost like a spreadsheet you punch it into. Be like, all right, it is sequence format L23. We are connecting that to camp location 15. And we are now monitoring for animation tags that can be of these 5 different types of, like, spawn prop, apply physics to prop, delete prop, spawn other prop. I think it was actually just a series of prop spawns and deletes we were able to do with everything. You know, it was like when he's the prop, the knife's in his hand, it's one prop, he stabbed it in the wall, we delete the hand prop and spawn the wall prop. All very seamless, you know. And then we just got those out. So that was fun, but a big part of that was just focusing on like keeping players engaged in the game and just being very almost fanatical about like we are not allowed to take players out of gameplay in this. Everything they do, if they walk away from the conversation, they've got to be aware of that. If they move to a weird position, we got to handle that. What happens if they get in the way of that knife being thrown? How do we solve that for that kind of problem? You know, while keeping players playing. Let me think. Grand Theft Auto 5. Let me see. We've only got 10 minutes left, so I want to see if there's any other questions we can get to.
All right. There's a question here. Do you believe that a design position is something that's achievable as an entry-level job? You talked a bit about this earlier, but is there kind of thoughts that you have about like actually getting in entry level? Is it something that's achievable? Maybe from somebody who's starting, 2 years ago, they haven't really touched games at all.
I'd say if you haven't made a game, then I mean, like I think it's be somewhat obvious, but like that'll be very, very difficult for you to get a design job because you haven't shown that you've been able to actually do the job. This is what I'm saying. Like, make a game, release a game, iterate on it, get customers, all that kind of stuff. That's the most important thing you can display. It is certainly possible. I have hired junior designers who don't have a lot of commercial experience, but they have shown me their ability to like make a level, make it to a specification, to release it publicly. They have actually been able to work within some smaller companies, just helping out, that kind of stuff. Another big thing that actually we look for, and this actually surprised a lot of people, we look for customer service jobs. Have you worked at a McDonald's? Have you worked at a car wash? Worked in a warehouse? Have you had to deal with customers? Because every job's got customers, and they're usually kind of annoying. So I need to know, work with a customer, even if the customer is being a pain in the ass, and you're still getting them their goddamn McFlurry or what have you. You know, it's super important. It's like, I was talking with a career coach about this. This is a guy who does like executive level training. And I said, what's more important, a degree from Harvard or someone who's worked at McDonald's? He's like, dude, I want to see someone who's worked at McDonald's. If you got the degree from Harvard, all I know is you've got rich parents. But I need to know that you've actually been able to like do a job and put up with shit, you know? Just part of the job. It's kind of, I think it's a little silly how how much a lot of these entry-level roles are looked down upon when they're so critical for teaching important skills. Like the number of, like, I've actually talked with other, like, senior leaders about this. I said, okay, like, think of the best people on your team. Now tell me how many of those people had customer service jobs. And they would pause, go, oh my God, you're right. I'm like, yeah, it counts. It's important, you know? It's like, yeah, like if I see someone who's like coached Little League or like helped at a farmer's market or that kind of stuff. I said, or even worked fast food jobs. I'm like, okay, cool. Tell me about that job and what you took away from it. You know, one of the best designers I ever hired, he worked summers peeling onions at a local fair. And he told me about his design process for bringing his work tools in, so I wouldn't be like, his eyes wouldn't get all red and his hands wouldn't be all chapped and that kind of stuff. And I liked it because he approached it as a design job. Another great designer I hired worked as a carpenter and was interviewing for an audio design role. And he talked to me about the music of tools. He's like, I just sit there and I'd listen to people working in the shop and I'd hear the music. I'm like, okay, cool. I like that. That's what I'm wanting to hear.
All right, I think we got time for maybe one last question here, and then we'll let you go because obviously you've got places to be.
Hopefully so.
Yeah, you had experience in both AAA and some indie projects. what do you find is maybe more appealing to you? Do you enjoy like the AAA workflow, or maybe just the fact that the finished product is, as grand as it is, or do you find that indie is maybe a little bit more your style, so to speak?
Oh, it doesn't really. I'm good either way. For me, the big thing is like how oriented are we towards the customer? That's what I like. It's like if we are, if I'm able to do my best work and I'm able to make something that people really love, and that's our like what we're focused on. Like, oh, people are gonna love when this happens. I'm gonna do this, and we're gonna do that, and like that was actually one of the things I really liked about like when I was working at Rockstar. Is like a lot of times we'd be working late, we get something done, and me and like my little team would ever be heading out the door, and someone pause, be like, you know what if we did this? You'll be like, fuck, that's cool. Damn. All right, we're going back in there. Put on a pot of coffee. This is gonna be so fucking awesome. This happened, and this is gonna, you're up late. It's great. It's a lot of fun. And I've also been like, so like that's what I'm looking for. If it's an indie or a AAA, and I've been at AAAs where like it just feels like you're just sitting there at like a, just punching in a formula, and it doesn't really like there's no chance to actually make this thing better. They just, they want to hit really weird metrics, and like that's the I just. I've been on like some very large companies, and I'll be like, hey man, we got a design problem here. Like this navigation system isn't working for the type of gameplay we have. And they'll be like, well, that's the standard navigation system all companies use, so it's what we're using. If it works for them, it works for us. Like, oh, for God's sakes, just kill me. So it's going to be bad because it's bad for everyone. There's no chance for us to make this better. Great. Now we're equally terrible. Hooray. It's actually like there's a where I'm working right now, part of the agreement was like I'm working for a small indie, because I was like, okay, like part of the, I guess, negotiation is like, look at, I want to make this the best game possible, and we're going to completely redo the design process, the development process, all this kind of stuff, to try to just orient this just towards like making this something that players really, really love, while working within a budget and to a deadline. That's actually, sorry, one other thing I want to jump in. For God's sakes, as a designer, do not attach your designs to being able to increase the budget. You always have to be able to, like, what makes you a good designer is you can do more with less. Like that's the thing. Like honestly, anybody can make a great game with unlimited time and unlimited money. That's not a skill. That's just a random search pattern at that point. So it's like what I want to see as a designer, you're like, you know what? I know we got like 35 weapons. Let me pitch you on 12 that are all based on 3 core weapons, and this is how it's going to work. That's what I want to be hiring,
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll get you out a couple minutes early here. It was great hearing your insights, and I'm sure many of the students here are more knowledgeable for it. So thank you so much. If our students want to reach out to you, is there a easy way for them to do that? Do you accept like LinkedIn messages?
LinkedIn.
All right.
Get on LinkedIn. That is where job sourcing happens and where people network.
Well, there you go. Then.
It irritates me when people are talking about doing their networking on Discord or on Twitter. It's like, that's not where hiring managers are, man. That's where your buddies are. Your buddies are probably not the ones who are hiring. Get on LinkedIn, learn how to present yourself as a professional. That's an important thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and have fun with whatever you're doing, and hope your project
always
goes
have
well.
fun. That's part of the job. Also, again, for God's sakes, research data ROMs. Data ROMs, there it is. Less but better. That's your design mantra. Less but better. If you can do that, you're an awesome designer.
All right. Well, cool. We'll end it here. Take care, and bye-bye.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. And of course, and again, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want.
Yeah, make sure. It's a great resource for all you guys there. So do that.
All right. Adios.
Bye-bye.